that was Royce West talking about the willingness of Rashee Rice to cooperate with authorities. That's all well and good. We've been hearing that all week. The one thing we've been waiting to hear, the one question that needs to be answered, the most important thing from the perspective of the criminal justice system, who was driving the two cars, and was Rashee Rice driving either one of them? Here is Roy West making the statement that we have been waiting to hear.
During the interview, Mr. Rice acknowledged that he was driving the Lamborghini. That was the question that was asked, and he responded to that he was driving the Lamborghini. Mr. Rice wants to make certain that it's understood and appreciated that he's going to do everything in his power to bring their life back to as normal as possible in terms of injuries, in terms of property damages. He'll make certain that he is responsible for helping them to get through that particular part of this.
So, look, it's an unfortunate situation. It's good that there weren't serious injuries. That still never should have happened. We've shown the video multiple times this week. It was reckless. It was beyond reckless. It was repugnant to think of these guys treating it like it's a video game, racing through, going around cars. I mean, what? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Somebody could have gotten killed. And the reason why it was critical to know who was driving the Lamborghini Urus that you'll see here spun around with the flashers on, under Texas law and the law of most states, the one who's driving, if the one who's driving leaves the scene, that is a problem. And driving the vehicle creates one set of liability issues as it relates to the accident itself. Leaving the scene unlocks the more serious criminal penalties. Leaving the scene of an injury accident is a big deal. And, I think one of the reasons it took 5 days, and I don't fault the guy for exploring his options. You always want people to ultimately tell the truth. Sometimes the truth is told reluctantly. Sometimes the truth is told because anything other than the truth isn't going to fly. The dash cam that showed two guys getting out of the front seat, and the second one, based upon the other photos that we've seen published by TMZ, the second guy was Rashee Rice. The second guy out of the front passenger seat is the driver. He's the guy on the right, based upon the other photos we've seen from TMZ. So he was stuck. He was caught. He was in checkmate. There was nothing else he could do. He was only going to make it worse. And Miles, it was I think a balance of different issues. You got civil liability that he's not going to get away from because he owned one of the cars and was leasing the other car. His insurance policies, and hopefully for him he's got them, are going to be maxed out. And hopefully for him there is an exclusionary language that takes street racing off the table and says we're not going to give you coverage, you're on your own. And he may be in that problem as well. Then you've got criminal liability. You've got potential discipline from the team in the league, and you've got the PR realities. It's a bad look to walk away from the scene of an accident. It's a horrible look to say, we're out. No, we don't know. And usually when it happens, it's because the person is concerned about a DUI. Now, that specter hasn't been raised here, and one of the reasons it hasn't been raised is there was no way for the authorities to assess whether or not the people driving the car were under the influence because they left. That's why there's a law against leaving. So, ultimately, he's doing the right thing. But I can't help but wonder whether during those 5 days he explored all other options, all other alternatives to doing the right thing, and realized he's got no strategy other than to do what he needs to do, which is accept responsibility for what happened and admit he was driving the car.
Well, I mean, that's what lawyers are for, right? And I don't necessarily mean that in a negative way. That's just the reality of the situation. That's why you have an attorney, and the attorney explains the laws to you and then presents you with the options that you have and, ultimately recommends an option for you, right? Like that's what happens. So, I mean, exploring your options, that just kind of is what it is. I just, this is so unacceptable on so many levels. And the NFL needs to come down hard on this. I mean, obviously he's got, criminal liability, civil liability and all that. But when you are a league that in 2021 had a receiver for the Las Vegas Raiders, Henry Ruggs, do what he did, you know, and, go into a high rate of speed and ultimately in someone's life, the life of their dog, because they were racing effectively on the street, I mean, going at crazy speeds. Why is it that anyone in the NFL would do something this reckless and this stupid, this irresponsible? I mean, it is basically unfathomable to me why someone would do something like this. It is just, like I said, it's completely unacceptable. And, I guess we can commend Rice for doing the thing that he should do and take responsibility for it. But this never should have happened. And, we are, as a society, lucky that nothing worse happened from something this reckless and this stupid. So I hope Rice learns from this. I don't think he should, be behind the wheel of a car practically ever again, because you have shown that you are not responsible enough to handle it. Yeah, I'm glad that the outcome was not any worse than what it's been, because this is just, it's so unacceptable, Mike.
Well said. And look, we played the clip at the top of the show of Raheem Morris in his first meeting with Falcons players. I hope that every NFL head coach and every college head coach and every coach of every team involving folks who are young and maybe inclined to get behind the wheel of a car and drive it too fast shows that dash cam video and tells the story of Rashee Rice and also Henry Ruggs. But we didn't have dash cam video of Henry Ruggs. We've got in living color exactly what happened, courtesy of that camera that was on the dashboard of a car that was trailing the incident. Every team, and our jurisdiction's the NFL, we won't worry about other sports leagues on this front, but this is a great teachable moment. This could be you. I remember when I was 18, 19, 20 years old and I became aware of the dynamic that you are charged higher car insurance rates until you turn 25. And I thought that's like reverse age discrimination or something. The reality is the human brain isn't fully formed until the age of 25 as it relates to appreciating and understanding the connection between the things we do and the consequences. Mm-hmm. Like when you're 25, you finally get it. The actuarial tables tell us that when the human being celebrates his or her 25th birthday, that is when the brain is fully developed to the point where it can process conduct and consequence. And when you're younger than 25, you do some dumb stuff because you haven't really gotten to the point where you can fully appreciate the connection between the dumb thing you do and how it can affect others and you. So to the extent that there is an external source to try to accelerate and expedite the process of getting the brain to realize if you do dumb things, bad things can happen, take full advantage of it. Every coach in the NFL, and we know some of you watch the show. First of all, thank you. Hello. We hope you're on the elliptical or the bike and, multitasking. Use that. Use that video with your guys when they come in for the first meeting. Show it to them. Explain to them how bad it could have been for the other people in that car and how bad it's going to be for Rashee Rice, even though the worst thing didn't happen because he was driving extremely recklessly, because he left the scene of the accident. He's going to be looking at potential prison time. Now, we know what we hear all the time, 1 to 5 years in prison, and we know what happens. That isn't the case at the end of the day, but there'll be some consequence. And like you said, the league needs to come down on him. And I was hoping that the league was going to be ready to intervene and say, if the strategy was going to be they can't prove beyond a reasonable doubt who was driving the car, if nobody says anything, that the league would have said to Rashee Rice, you're not playing professional football again until you say under oath whether or not you were driving that car. Silence is not acceptable here. This strategy of nobody's going to say anything, so nobody's going to get in trouble, that's not going to fly here. This isn't grade school where if everybody keeps their mouth shut, nobody knows who threw the egg at the school, and it might have been me, but there were others. But that's that's a trip down memory lane for another day. But you're not going to get away with this by just keeping your mouth shut. So fortunately, it didn't come to that, or maybe it did. We were talking earlier about things that happened behind the scenes. Maybe Maybe the NFL applied a little pressure behind the scenes. Hey, what the hell's going on here? This happened on Saturday. The police want to talk to you. You're not talking to them. You know, we get the feeling you're trying to maybe cook up a strategy where you can get out of this jackpot you drove your way into. That's not going to fly. We're not going to let you off the hook for this. You better do the right thing. And like you said, it's one of the purposes of a lawyer. I used to have on my business cards, attorney and counselor at law, because it's one thing to represent someone in court. It's another thing to sit down and talk to them about what their right move is. That's different from being a zealous advocate fighting on behalf of the client. At some point, you got to talk to the client about what really is what. And that was always one of my great challenges, because the client would be there while you're fighting on the client's behalf. And the client's like, yeah, I like what this guy's saying. And then you take the client back to your office and you're like, well, here's what we're dealing with. Well, what about all that stuff you said in court? Well, that's what I had to say because I'm defending you. I'm advancing your position. Now I'm trying to tell you that might not work. All that stuff I said might not fly. So we got to make some other decisions here. So, good for Royce West. Good for whoever influenced Rashee Rice. There's an old saying like, wisdom often never comes at all. It's better that it arrive late than never, or words to that effect. So even though it took a few days, they got to the right spot. Maybe he had no choice. Maybe he tried kicking and screaming to avoid it, but he got to the right spot, taking responsibility. It never should have happened. They never should have left, but he's doing the right thing by taking responsibility. And whatever happens, happens.
He is. Yes, he is doing the right thing now, right? I mean, you cannot fix the things that have already happened. The only thing that you can do is take action in the future. And I guess to that same point, and you brought this up with coaches, showing this video, there are mandatory trainings that NFL players and NFL staff, team staff, they all have to go through, right? Betting, sports betting has been one of those things that, I took trainings on back when I worked for NFL teams 5+ years ago. So this should be one of them, right? I mean, they always talk about, drunk driving and doing things like this. It also has to do with reckless driving. Okay. And so Rice, Ruggs, you can look at any other sport you want, right? This needs to now be a mandatory part of training. All right. You cannot go on the highway or on any road. I shouldn't just say highway. You cannot get behind the wheel of a car and drive recklessly at a high rate of speed, because guess what? You don't know what the hell is going to happen, and you could end up killing someone. And it needs to be that stark. So that's the thing that I hope can come out of this, is that it becomes mandatory now. It's not just drunk driving, it is reckless driving. And that needs to be drilled into the head of not just NFL players and not just NFL staff, not just team staff, but all of us in society, really. But as it pertains to what we're talking about right now, and players who can afford luxury hyper speed vehicles like Lambos, this is something that needs to be drilled into the heads of them.
And by the way, we have the quote, thanks to the quick work. I'm going to assume it was Gary in the control room that found this. Wisdom too often never comes, and so one ought not to reject it merely because it comes late. That comes from the former Supreme Court justice named Felix Frankfurter, which when I first heard that name when I was a first-year law student, I laughed. And I still, it's an awesome name. If I had to make up a name for myself, call me Felix J. Frankfurter. He was an Austrian-born American jurist who served as Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States from 1939 until 1962. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.